We're now streaming live on YouTube.
Cool.
Hi, YouTube.
Go for it. It's all you, Michael.
So, welcome everybody. Long time ago at Autodesk University, there was a session called Stump the Chumps, and it had some actual experts in Revit on it. And some years back, a bunch of us were hanging out after AU talking about the fact that we missed that panel, and we realized that we knew how to do a lot of really crazy stuff in Revit, and we're like, oh well, we should get our friends together and do this, and this is the result. So I'm Michael Freert. I'm the BIM manager at Pope Design Group in sunny St. Paul, Minnesota. I've been working in Revit since really 6 and doing BIM management stuff off and on since then, and project design stuff. This whole thing works based on your questions. So please toss questions in the chat. Please give us vaguely enough information to be able to run with them. We're going to try to stick to just within core Revit. We will say like, you really want to get an add-in for that if it needs to be. But we're really going to try to aim for just core Revit answers. So please put in questions, because this gets really boring if you just listen to us chat amongst ourselves, although that is kind of hilarious for us. I think I've known this panel for at least 7 years for everybody. And I think we're at a collective like 80 or 85 years of Revit use across the team. So we've got a little bit of experience. But I'm going to start looking at questions here and pointing them to folks. And somebody introduce themselves next.
I'm Robert Beckbar. I'm a BIM account manager for MG2 Architects. I think, as like Michael said, I've known him for at least 7 years. I think it's longer than that. But Michael and I kind of dreamed up this idea many years ago, and it's been fun every time. So thanks. And yes, give us questions, because it's no fun just talking to ourselves.
I'm Danya Tabor Hansen. I am a senior CAD BIM analyst at Nelson Worldwide. Took this position in August, so it's still feeling very new to me, but I am loving it. I do Revit forensics, CSI stuff, just, what everybody else on this panel also does. Dig in, see what's wrong, fix the problem.
So I am Sean Zerbis. I am the technical evangelist at CTC Software, and my daily task is to help any of my customers and partners be as efficient as possible in the Revit space. So this is the fun side of my job, just talking about, answering certain questions.
I'm John Atkinson, the National Engineering BIM Manager for DLR Group. And I've been using Revit since 2006. Yeah.
And lastly, I'm Vicki Harris, firm-wide BIM leader with HKS. In my role, I primarily focus on implementation of BIM standards and guidelines across the whole firm, as well as addressing, practice and sector-specific needs, as well as client needs from a BIM and project delivery. But I started using Revit right out of school back in 2007. Had no idea how to use it, learned how to build families, and figured out I like this thing called Revit. And so here I am. I don't get to use it as much these days, but I do throw myself at it when I work on my own design projects to try to keep my skills up there. So I may not be able to answer all of the questions, but I will try to jump in where I can.
All right, so first question, we've got a couple questions preloaded from previous sessions, just in case, but first question we got today is there a way to hide individual items in a linked model? If it is not allowing me, what can I do to the original model to help with that? Anyway, who wants to take that?
I can jump in on that. I can show a good way, and I can show a not so good way on how to do this.
Is it override the line weights to white, or the line styles to white?
I could show a really bad way as well. All right. The the not preferred way to hide elements from a linked model, I think, is just like within your main model, you can select objects, you can right click, and you can choose hide in view. And there's the ability to hide objects in your view in your active model. Technically, a lot of people don't know this, you can do the exact same workflow through links, assuming you can select your links in the first place. That's an option in Revit since like 2015 to not be able to select links. But if you can select the link, you can mouse over an object in the link and hit your tab key until that object highlights just like it would in your main model. When you select it, you can right click and then do hide in view, and it will hide the linked object from the model in your active view. Now, I don't ever recommend hiding in view. That's a really dirty way of hiding objects because it makes it uphill for anybody else who wants to show it, because now they have to reveal hidden elements. The only way for them to fix it is to reveal hidden elements, to then do the same thing you did, but undo the hide in view. Or there are add-ins that help with that too, but the hiding in view is better done with a filter. And I like the follow-up part of the question. If it's not allowing you, what can you do? Well, you can build a filter in a view that filters objects. That does include linked model objects, and you can then hide an object based on its properties. So if you're like, I don't want to see any furniture device that has the manufacturer steel case, then you can hide based on that. And that's the best way because at least it's a property in a view. But there's two ways you could do it. Tab select, hide in view explicitly object by object, or a filter. And then there's the really destructive way that Michael was talking about, which is to use the line work command and line work it white. Do not do that. Please don't do that.
And to that, I have to add, because, sometimes it's, the way I saw that question was that they don't want to hide a whole category, but there's just one specific object from the linked model they want to hide. And I guess that's where I come back from my side of things and say, if that thing needs to be hidden for your reason, is it because it shouldn't be there to begin with? And if that's the case, then having the conversation with the original model owner to say, hey, this thing continues to be in a place it's not supposed to be. Can we fix that? Because hiding it is only just part of the solution. If it's in the incorrect place or the incorrect item, whatnot, then it needs to be addressed in a different way.
Alternatively, to add to kind of what Vicky's talking about here, sometimes it's in the right place, but it's in the way of something that you're modeling just because of elevational purposes. Sometimes the manipulating view ranges is the better option so that it's obscured from the view. It's not visible. It's just not within the range in that area. And for that, you could use something like a plan region potentially, so you can show your object from your discipline more clearly than other objects. But yeah, if it's in the wrong place completely, then let's fix that first.
And piggybacking on that, if it's not just one object, if you're doing a category, like Rashawn was saying, you can not even hide in view. You can go into managed links and inside the view and find that element like you would need anything else underneath the model category tab and turn that off. So you can go find steel case. You could go find one piece because they all have some driving thing underneath it. But if it's one item, it's Yep.
All right. So how to copy filters or any other items from one view template to the next?
Go.
The easiest way is you duplicate the view template and rename it, and then it brings over all the stuff with it. But if it's not there, I don't know of any way to copy and bring it in. You just have to reset it every time.
The only way to do it really is with an add-in. If you have an existing one that's applied to a bunch of views already, there is no way natively in Revit to copy the properties from one view template to another. You would need an add-in that does that task. So I would search for one that potentially helps you with that.
Can you access enough of that in Dynamo to be able to do it there for sort of native workflow?
Technically, everything that's available to an add-in, a normal add-in that's publicly available, is also available to Dynamo if you're clever enough to get it. Yes, it's the same API.
So maybe there.
Anytime we say you could do this with an add-in, that includes Dynamo. You just got to be really good with Dynamo.
Yeah.
And one thing I was going to say, like, for example, if you have two view templates that have different features and you're like, hey, I want to create one view template out of it, you can always apply, view template 1 to a view, apply view template to that same view and then use that view to create a brand new view template. So that could help at least save a little bit of problem, but you just have to make sure that view template 1 and 2 are not conflicting, right? They're not going to override one thing from the other.
I've done that sort of thing where I'll take one view, duplicate the view with all the settings I want, make a view template out of a couple of the settings for the view, change a few things, make another view template out of a couple more settings for a view, and then apply one view template, then apply the next view template, then apply next view template to rebuild the settings I want, and then recreate the view template there.
And the real key there, everybody, is that within view templates, when you save it, there's little check boxes on the far right-hand side.
Yeah.
And when you check or uncheck those, it determines which properties from that template get applied. So when Michael's doing this, he's checking the 3 or 4 things that he wants to apply, and then checking a different 4 things. The real tricky thing comes in when you're trying to do something like, I've got these filters on this view and these other filters in this other view. There really isn't a good way to combine those. Revit just doesn't do it. And for that, that's where an add-in or some really clever Dynamo scripting is going to come into play.
Self-populating symbols list when devices are placed in views. Notebox schedule. I'm not sure what that question means. Does anybody?
I have an idea. So I have a lot of customers who like to go through and have a symbols legend that is dynamically driven.
Mm-hmm.
There's 2 ways to do this. And the reason why they want to do this specifically, why I think this person wants to do it, is because you don't want to have to keep micromanaging the graphic that's in the plan and the graphic that's in your legend. So the only way that I've found to successfully do this automatically is to have images associated to every piece of content that you have in the type image representation. Maybe it's a plan graphic or a 3D graphic or whatever you want that image to be. And in schedules, since about 2017, I think, you have the ability to show the type image in a schedule and the family name, of course, as well. And you could then tell it not to isolate every instance, so it just shows the one entry. And that would be that. But that's a very manual way, because you have to create the image and associate to the family. That's one way of doing it. John, I think you may have an idea of how to create a better, more sustainable dynamic symbol legend that shows the real content without all that manual work if you set it up once.
We do have a plan view that we use that is dynamic, but it's not you can't choose which symbols to pick. We standardized the symbol list and said, well, if it's in there, it's in there. If it's not, then the symbol may still appear in the legend. So we really haven't gone to dynamics.
Yeah, the nice thing about that particular legend, though, and the reason why I think it's probably the better option for most companies, is that if a user in the company changes that graphic representation of that symbol for whatever reason, it will be the same in both places. And it's not even like the image technique that I was mentioning on schedules. Not really my preferred way, because if you change the symbol graphics in the plan, but you don't update the image, it's out of date again. And so the way that John does his plan view technique of dynamic legend is the content in the plan with real tags. And I love that technique. It's the best.
We've started doing not automatic, but using an annotative phase before everything else and putting content back there so that those legend things are a real thing. They are the actual thing that will happen later on. And you can have 2 schedules that will show you everything in the project and everything in your elevation view and see if am I missing something. So it's not 100% automatic, but it'll at least get you the oh, I actually have this and it's not in that view. We should add it in. So this is a fun one. Regarding vertical based families, we have some light fixture families that are not able to be adjusted by clicking on the device and dragging it into a new position in the view. We have to select the element and then enter a new elevation. Who's got a fix for that one?
Really quality custom content. There are techniques you can use for that. it's just families, but it's families that leverage a face-based object and a special hosting component control that lets you actually have that instance control from an elevation view where you can truly just drag it up and down. It's not a simple thing to assemble in the first place, but once built, you can make all of your families in the same way from it. But that will give you the ability. It does make for a pretty complex family to manage and maintain as an end user, as a not experienced family creator over time. But if you're not maintaining it and you're just using it, it actually uses really well.
Yeah,
I
I
agree
would
with
say,
that.
yeah, a lot of our content, we have, gone to that method of face-based because it does allow flexibility, but it also allows, for hosting abilities that aren't, native to that model. So face-based is really beneficial when, like light fixtures that you may have to host to a consultant's model. It's not going to pick up that wall from a linked model because that wall doesn't live, but it's going to pick up that face for you and say, oh yeah, I can still host to this. And it brings in that flexibility. I would also say, again, where I come from, so I'm sorry if I play devil's advocate here, but when things are flexible, there might be a reason why your standards manager wants you to type in a number because they don't want light fixtures to be at, odd eighth and quarter inch increments just because you were able to drag it in an elevation up and down. So also kind of confirm the intent from those that are developing families within your firm, or if you're the one developing it, make sure you keep that in mind of, is this something that can have random dimensions or do we need to have whole numbers type of thing?
Excellent. Would love to have a global parameter to control the slope dimension, but there is no slope type parameter to control. John, did you say you wanted to jump in on that one?
Well, it's a
Dania sounded excited there.
No, I was trying to tag in on the last one.
Oh, let's go back real quick.
Well, it's just if you're where you reference a file in and you don't have the walls, you hope that the family that you're wanting to put on a vertical is not wall hosted, but is vertical. You can put in a reference plane and have it host to that. But that's a nice way of handling that. Like Vicky was saying, when you don't have the walls, it beats doing a copy monitor of all the walls just so you can host something on there.
Mm-hmm.
Now for the slope, hit it, John.
dang. Bad news. There being that there is no way to access that slope parameter. Usually what I recommend doing is either start modeling with slope from the get-go or model your entire waste system flat and then apply the slope. That's about the best way you can do it. That way you get the entire system without, if you just tab through and grab the whole thing. Anybody else?
I think the slope parameter is just one that got added, and then there's been no further development in terms of the ability to use it to its full extent.
Exactly.
So answer, go to forums, post about it, get Autodesk's attention in terms of addressing that parameter.
Something about squeaky wheels.
Yeah.
Be squeaky. You'll eventually get some attention at some point, especially if the rest of the industry wants it as well. Yeah, I mean, everything Autodesk has that's slope based, the pipes, the roofs, the floors, the everything, the parameter exists, but it can't be linked to anything. So yeah, I mean, you gotta complain before it's gonna happen. Autodesk doesn't just give us features because it's fun for them. They give us features because people want it and people complain enough. That's what gets the attention.
Now, I do know that the slope parameter is accessible in Dynamo. So you could probably make a script to pull the slope and anything greater than 0 or something like that. You can grab that and slope it, change the value.
It might be, it's probably possible to pull that out with a schedule and then edit the schedule outside of Excel and push that back in for certain family types.
I haven't tried that, but yeah, it's a good idea.
I've run, going into add-ins, which we're trying to avoid, but I've had that happen in a couple of situations where like the only real way to edit a parameter that I wanted to do in a lot of places was to do it quickly outside in Excel. We just gotta thank you for an earlier question, so happy to help there. Extending on my original question, the Revit model I have linked has a SAT component and will not allow me to hide it individually. Do filters allow me to do this?
Oh, yeah, no.
Yeah,
Everything.
I was just experimenting with that. You can't access the, do a filter. I couldn't get to the extension name, part of the name. I was like, oh, maybe we can just hide it by extension, but you can't get to the .sat or RFA or anything. So.
So in that case, like when we've had things that, come in that need to be, are exported as SAT, we take them to a Revit family, load them in the Revit family. And, if you have multiple things that are modeled as SAT, but they all need to come in as one, then you can start to, assign some categories and some properties in the family so that then you're controlling it through a family. But you then lose, the link functionality. So if somebody updates that SAT, you have to go to the family, reload that SAT file, make sure everything comes through clear. So there's pros, there's cons. I'm assuming if it's SAT, you're doing something with Rhino. And my question would be, have you looked at Rhino inside? That might help you a little bit more.
The other option too is you can also bring it in and have them put it on their own work set too. So you can just isolate it by work set as well. Turn it off. I mean, it's not the best solution, but at least you can access and have one global way of touching it.
Yeah, model management using work sets for visibility is not the preferred technique, certainly, like Robert said, but in this case, in a pinch, it is an option. But understand that if work sets ever get stripped from that model, or if those names change, you may lose your visibility settings in the model where you're trying to control the visibility, because that's volatile. So it does work, but I mean, it does let you retain the link, which is cool.
How can I work with restrictions in reference planes when creating a family model? I'm trying to make a post-tension cable with points are divided into 10 sessions with parameters varying in every XYZ directions, but I'm really struggling at it.
Danya.
I'm looking at this like restrictions in reference planes when creating a family model. Well, that's a good start if you're getting your reference planes in there to begin with. Make a post-tension cable, which points are divided in 10 sessions. Are they equal sessions or not? Or parametrically varying in every X, Y, and Z direction. But I'm really struggling with it.
Well, I'm wondering if this is where reference lines may be necessary, because it sounds like you might be trying to do things at different angles, and reference planes is not good at that. But yeah, I think I would have to visually see what you are trying to accomplish.
Yeah, if you're going in every direction, yeah.
I'm wondering if it wants to be a nested family to locate stuff off of, or adaptive components.
Or both.
Yeah,
I agree.
Or potentially both.
Yeah, I was actually going to suggest the same thing. Just like that lighting question earlier about moving lighting fixtures elevationally with drag points, sometimes using a nested jig that you can host something to can give you a lot of really good control without the need to over reference plane and over constrain your model.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that an adaptive component might be the ticket in this because of the very strong flexibility of all of these points, knowing how PT cables work. But that jig might also be a meaningful way of like hosting those points and hanging things off of it like an armature.
And you can nest jigs within each other. I wouldn't go past like three or four levels, but you can get a lot more complex behavior. That's a lot less of a pain in the tuchus to actually build, and even use the same jig in different orientations with different parameter mappings to make that happen.
Yep.
From YouTube, as a BIM manager, how can I monitor and manage uniform Revit versions for all of our users without local admin privileges? Ooh, that's a fun
So-
one.
I can kind of add on that. I mean, I don't think that there's a native way built in. You can definitely build your own plugin that will pull that information, but there are ones on the market. CTC has one, Data Suite. Not here to plug their stuff, but it does give you, that information of Revit versions build so that you can then make sure everybody is on the build that you have approved for your company or your project. But there are other ones that are tied to IT systems, like Landsweeper and CrowdStrike, that again tell you what's installed on somebody's machine, and let you look into that additional information. But unfortunately, Revit, it would be nice if the Workshare Monitor was better and it provided that kind of information, but Workshare Monitor is, I think, essentially dead these days. But Revit files don't talk to each other and let you know inherently that you have 4 people using this build and 4 people using another build, without pulling that data elsewhere and then looking at it.
Oh, it
So-
will let you know in the future with a crashing model.
Oh, that's true. Or, schema errors or something like that, but you still don't know who the culprit is until you start digging.
So we've moved to using more IT-based solutions, like played around with Spiceworks a little bit, and it wasn't quite there. And PDQ does a really solid stuff for my needs for device management, but that requires admin privileges. What occurs to me is if you're shared, assuming you are on this might even work with BIM 360. If you've got all of your local files saved in the same folder for all users, you can path that all to, say, like a C Revit projects folder. You could probably scrape the Revit version from those local file accesses without needing admin privileges. You just need access to the computer.
I could potentially give you another scraper that wouldn't require the common folders even. Revit journal file gets saved to a pretty standardized location on all user computers.
And that'll have all of the...
Yep. When Revit fires up, it will log a number of bits of information. Now you have to learn how to scrape a journal file, and that's not the most fun, but you can definitely do it with a home brewed solution for that. But I'm going to second what Vicky said. Like, there's plenty of tools in industry that are not expensive that you can get to help you with this, so you don't have to homebrew. I mean, like, our goal today is to talk stock in Revit, but Revit doesn't have that stock. So whatever you do is going to be custom, whether you build it or somebody builds it for you. Definitely getting that information is key. I would strongly suggest you look into something that can log data on your behalf so that you can be far more proactive, regardless of what the source of that is.
And it's so easy. Like, the cost for a license of some of these is a couple $100, but it's going to save you dozens of hours of messing around with an ad hoc solution. Like, unless you're really, really, really good with batch files, like that's just not going to happen. Can anyone elaborate on using multi-adaptive components? From what I understand, these are families that are automatically hosted to a surface. Is this correct? If so, have any of you ever used them?
I've used multi-adaptive components, but not real successfully. It's, you kind of got to know what you're doing. I don't know if I'd say you had to map to a surface, because I've had them with going vertically off the surface. But the best solution, if you really want to learn to do them, there's videos out there. Go on YouTube, search up Marcelo. He's done things with adaptive components that I don't think any of us could even dream about doing. But I wouldn't even want to try to do what he does with them. But yeah, you can. I say they're a very powerful tool, but they're also a very dangerous tool, because if they don't work, they're pain in the butt to fix. So
they're one of those things that, like a good Dynamo script, is super powerful and super useful. But if you weren't the person who wrote it and it wasn't well annotated, you're SOL. You're not going to figure it back out. And like a really, really complex family behavior, like unless you note it up well, unless you follow really good best practices for like how you organize things, somebody's going to delete that view that you put all of your control dimensions in, and it's going to explode.
Just as a tip, I'm assuming this is the same individual who asked about the PT cable. There was either a session done at Autodesk University, or it was a blog post at one point that talked about a path of travel tool that leveraged adaptive components, multi-point adaptive components. You might start taking a look at that and see how that was built and adjust it for your PT cable needs, because that I think is going to give you the best starting point. Stock. It was probably from 2015, 2016.
I've used that one before.
A while back.
Yeah, I have used that one before. It's not bad. It's a pretty, you gotta kind of know how it was built to modify it. Another one, if you were looking at it on YouTube videos, is Brian Mackey has good videos on adaptive components as well.
Yep.
Yeah. A lot of his are more like targeted to stairs, but I think they're the best explanations I've found for adaptive components yet. He did a trellis one time with one that was that was unbelievable with multiple points, and
if you can master the trellis, if you can follow along and master that, you'll be able to do your PT cable no problem. No problem.
Best method to copy Revit model from BIM 360 to use as links in non-BIM 360 model.
Okay.
Donnie and Bob both wanted to jump in on this one.
The question is, do you still need it linked to the BIM 360 model? Because you can detach a model and put it on a server, but then you're losing your connectivity with the original BIM 360 model. As far as I know, there is no way to keep a model off of BIM 360 and keep it linked to BIM 360 and have it, the one that's kept off, linked somewhere else.
Yeah, I was kind of reading that they wanted to bring it down and not have it to BIM 360, which case it's just it's a download the source file from the buttons on this out of the BIM 360, and you're done.
You download it? No, you detach it.
Well, I download it and then I just save as and detach it, but yes.
Yeah.
No, see, I just do I do a save as and detach it. Yeah, but without download, I just open up the BIM 360 and do a save as and detach
I do the download, and then that brings it down, and then I can save it again. So
my guess is that they are also trying to see if it can stay connected to some instance of BIM 360. We have a lot of that, and unfortunately, no. You cannot have a non-BIM 360 project. Technically, I'm going to expand on it. Link to a live BIM 360 model. So live, absolutely not. You can, if you use desktop connector, link to the published version of that model. So again, it's not live, it's the last published version, which is basically an archive version. And there is still some problems with that, because if it is a work share file, linking through desktop connector is hit or miss. What I understand, V2 of desktop connector is coming out. That does address a lot of concerns that desktop connector V1 did not address. I was not actively in the beta group of that, so I don't know if anybody on this call was, and if it truly does address that. But that is a way, and I again will say, we've had some projects that it's been successful with, when it is a work share file, and other projects it absolutely will not work. And so you're still stuck with somebody taking that published version, making a copy of it, so it's not work shared, and then linking to it. So, try to get your other project on BIM 360, but again, you can't link across BIM 360 projects either. You can't link from one to the other. So a few kind of nuances there.
Yeah, and I want to jump in and add one little thing to that as well. From an API point of view, the programming interface, Dynamo side, custom tool development side, there are some times where you can trick and override the functionality natively built into Revit. And I will tell you, you cannot in this case, because I have tried for 3 months to get my devs to do that for that exact purpose, and you can't. So no.
You also need to worry right now too on the desktop connector. It's kind of a known issue. If you don't have The newer version isn't playing well with people who have the old version out still installed. So
Yeah.
before you jump on your desktop connector, everybody needs to make sure consultants and everybody's going at the same time because
Yeah.
it is crashing people's computers. So
Yeah, I'd like that was not me encouraging the use of desktop
Yeah.
connector. Just wanted to make sure everybody knows it is kind of possible, but desktop connector comes with a whole nother book of complexities. So please, kind of
Yes.
follow some of those issues and then think, about installing it.
Yeah, desktop connector is great in a really small, isolated situation, but once you start to play with other folks and are not really managing versions, bad. Love to see the transcription for that one. Cabinets, window family. I have created a multi-nested family for each with hundreds of nomenclatures in a list file through Excel for cabinets and windows in one family. Is there a way to keep others from editing a single type in the family and replacing it back in the model? They should not be doing this, but they have just because they don't want to go load the list from the family and get the correct type again. We can't slap people's hands here.
I don't know if any way they can lock
you,
that down. Can you?
Yeah,
No, you can't.
That's when you need a software package that monitors what's going on, that gives them an alert instead of slapping their hands, and tell them that this is not advisable.
BIM beats.
What is it?
BIM beats.
Okay, we have an add-on Guardian. Yeah.
Guardian too.
I'm gonna say that Guardian could stop it as well.
Yeah, but to try to get people to, I don't know, adhere to standards. I have not seen that since I started in AutoCAD version 1.2, and it didn't carry over into Revit either. So.
The best way to get people to adhere to standards is to make the standards easy for them to follow, and to give them the content within the standards that they need.
Yep.
So if you've got hundreds of items in there, unless they need hundreds of items, they're not going to sift through them because they're going to have trouble finding them. Now, if they're using a content management tool, that might help. You could do something like try and force override, reload that family and reset all the parameters, but then you run the risk of breaking their project. So that'll get you to standards following, but it means that they're doing rework. Hopefully they'll learn that lesson after a couple times, but that's creating more work to follow the standards. If you need it standardized because it's a specific part and they shouldn't be editing it, that you can't customize, that's one thing. But if it's just because it's a standard, I would question if that's a good standard.
Also, it's a lot of education. If you sit down and explain to people, sometimes they will, and why it's that way and how it would prevent them from making the files corrupt and heavy and crashing and everything. They may, start playing that game with you. Can't guarantee it, but at least they'll try. It's always worth a try. Education seems to work, part of the time.
And it's also tough when you have that nested family. That's also a type in there, because if you change the type, it can edit where it's nested and stuff beyond that too. So it may be better if you nest something, you may want to just change its name where it's nested so it doesn't overwrite.
Yeah, when you're changing something from the stock behavior, always rename it.
Yeah.
Like that's, or make it just an instance-based parameter. But if it's going to be a type thing, rename it.
And there are some really clever things you can do with instance-based parameters and large lists of data that can make this a different workflow for them where it's not type-based. But I mean, really, back to what Michael said, if you make it easy, they'll do it. If you make it hard, or it's not the easiest, path of least resistance, they're just going to do what they want anyway. That's just how people are.
And
people are lazy.
It needs to be easy for them, not easy for you. So it may be extra work for us as BIM managers or software designers to build the tool, but it needs to be easy for the person who's using it, and that's the most important thing. And that stacks, because if it's a whole lot of time for us, but then you've got a whole lot of users who are saving a whole lot of time, that's a positive win. John's jumped in on this one. Are the results from built-in Revit tools, energy model and systems analysis used for HVAC load calculations, ventilation calculations, etc., giving comparable results to better known third-party applications, train trace, carrier, HTTP, etc. And the follow-up, should the older heating and cooling loads Revit application still be used? I understand there was a deficiency with how it calculates loads. Please advise.
Yeah, so I'm not a real big fan of the energy modeling, the green building stuff. It's more of a architectural tool than anything else. But I've had really good luck with the heating and cooling loads inside Revit. As long as your construction's overrides are set properly, you'll get pretty good accuracy. And is it perfect? No. Does it have deficiencies? Yes. But you'll probably be within 10% of your final goal. So usually I'd run that in my SDs, DDs, get sort of a base or rule of thumb measurement that I can at least start calculating equipment, and then from there export it out to something like IES. We've been working on a solution to create a much better GBXML type export, going through Rhino out to IES, and then we pull that data back in. But being that train trace 700 is going to be discontinued very soon, and train trace 3D is a lackluster product, I still like using the heating and cooling loads inside Revit, just to get a base.
I've played with the energy modeling stuff a little bit, mostly based on a session I sat in on from Dan Stein at Built last year that dealt with it's good enough for planning. The nature of our practice is such that we're not necessarily doing that heavily, so we're going to rely on third-party stuff, but it's good enough to start to make really serious decisions, which it sounds like the MEP side is not dissimilar on.
I was going to say on that, when I used to do it for the architectural side and schematic design for preliminary layouts and stuff, we used it a lot, but it was base, giving us an idea if we put enough glass in and not enough glass, stuff along that line. But once it got into, hey, you need to do loads and you need to actually do energy calcs, we turned that over to the mechanical guys and said, use your tools, you got the tools. And Autodesk didn't have them. So, but for the start of a project to get you some ideas and conceptually, yeah, I didn't have it was good enough for us at that time.
Take the bad time to Control V there. Is there a way to circuit light fixtures in a linked model without copying, monitoring all the lights into our model?
The short answer is no.
Squeaky wheel. It'll be a squeaky wheel. Nope, you can't.
No.
You also can't plumb to or heat connect to anything in a linked model because I think the developers don't like MEP engineers. So there you go.
All right. So unfortunately, not really. Yeah, and that's the least horrible method I've seen is having your linked folks actually provide all of those things that need to connect on one really, really easy to filter view. Bring that view in and copy monitor that. Doesn't solve it, but it's, turn on this work set or turn on, it's not a good use of work sets, but turn on something.
Yeah.
Get all of them in one shot to be able to bulk select as opposed to try and chase everything down.
Yeah, but I would definitely, again, recommend that this is something that people voice, because my guess is that this is from an architectural and MEP standpoint where, in some cases we say, sure, MEP designer, you place the lights because it's back of house and just do it by, necessary codes, but in front of design where either we have a lighting designer or the architectural team is designing it, we want control of that location and we want it in our model. But then the engineer has to do all the circuiting and it's a pain in the butt. So again, having that voice out there and saying this is a problem, this is creating more work for our teams, can make a change for you guys.
I will add to that a slightly different point of view. And architects, please don't hang me right now. But MEP people, E-people, do you really want to trust the content and properties provided to you by the architects who don't know how to build electrical content for you with proper connectors in the first place? I would venture you probably don't. I think you want to place, let their symbol be there, but you may want to place just a disconnect box that has the properties and circuit it, instead of copying their fixture in whose construction isn't going to match your standards, parameters aren't going to match your standards, the connectors are probably trash. While the graphics are beautiful, they might cast light. Do you really want to trust that device to circuit to?
But then that separate J box should be able to be linked to the light.
Agreed.
So if the designer moves the light, now the engineer isn't on a needle in a haystack hunt trying to find all those J boxes that they need to update. So
True.
Totally agree with you.
Yeah.
But there should be a way to connect.
Yes. It was when I was working in food service, they'd have give you all these connectors on all this equipment. And I'm like, they can't see it. Why do we have it in there? They reference our files that they don't see it. And yet they would still want to have all these connectors on there. And I had people that I don't know what the connectors are. I'll just put electric there. You put water there. Did you make sure it was flowing in or out? This is important. But yeah, don't trust them.
I was really pleased with some third-party food service content that had electric going to the gas fryers. That was
I did not train those people.
That was not one of yours, Danya. That was a fun RFI to try and get the food service consultant on that to figure out what was no, this is not like that. There's no electricity on that. Like it doesn't. Yeah. There's some coordination that really needs to happen. That BIM is all about coordinating. It's all about playing well with others. Speaking of playing well with others and sharing things, thoughts on sharing referencing one set of detail views between multiple Revit project files?
Yes, I like this one. You cannot share it from a reference file because we're talking details here. So reference files bring in model. They don't bring in details. They don't bring in detail views. They don't bring in schedules. They don't bring in the tags, etc., like that. What you do need to have is you can either work through a library system such as Hive or Unify or something, or you can also just have a seed file that has all your details in it, and you can insert views from file and bring in whatever you need. And that way you can have just one place where you go get them. I've used all three of those methods that I mentioned. I've used Unify, Hive for add-ons, and I've also used just a seed file that had everything in it, that you'd have one for casework, one for doors, one for walls, one for whatever, instead of having everything in one file. But as far as sharing it within a link file, you can't do it.
How often do you, when you bring over a detail anyways, that you just keep it the way it is, you bring it in? I mean, it's rare that happens. You always seem to have people editing something or something needs to be changed, or it's rare that you just bring it in and leave it.
So I have seen a scenario, a workflow on a multi-model building where it's difficult to have detail X over here and detail X over here reference the same drafted view if that drafted view isn't in both models, because the models are so big, you got to split them apart. Brian Mackey did a really interesting course on how to do this. His AU course was recorded a couple of years back. I think he's done it a number of years in a row at AU, at Built Conference, at RTC when it was RTC, on how to do detail linking between models. It's possible to do. I don't know of any tools that automate the workflow yet, but there is a workflow by leveraging plan views and some clever grouping, detail grouping, where you can do this somewhat successfully. if it has to be referenced live by multiple models simultaneously. If it doesn't have to be live referenced, and like Robert said, it's typically going to be customized in a specific isolated model, then I'm going to second what Danya said. Get a good content management system that lets you source it from a central location and bring it in so that it can be in your model directly and not referencing something central to complicate the workflow if it doesn't need to be complicated.
So I was gonna add, and I did have to answer a few things over here, so I apologize if this was already said. There is a third-party tool out there developed by Parallax that does do this, and the full intent is what Sean kind of described, is that you have a multi-building campus and they are using the same details across that building set. And so they don't want to have duplicate details within models, but they need to have them on sheets or whatever, or reference them. And so they pull from a central location. The caveat is it can only do it with drafting views, so only 2D elements. The plugin also allows you to modify that detail in the model that you bring it in. So if it is a little nuanced from the original and it doesn't break the link, it doesn't go update the other one, it just says it's disconnected. And if you ever want to say, no, revert back to the original, revert back to what I've linked it to, you can do that. Again, not trying to plug other people's software, but there is a solution out there that if you're doing this scenario, you may want to go check out.
And we've been revisiting our details in-house and come back to more or less what Robert said, that we want to have the default available, but so much of the time, either you just run with the default and it's fine and it hasn't changed for a couple of years and it's going to be okay, or it's something to start with and then manage from there. Any way to adjust some of the default settings in Revit? A couple of examples. Yes. Roof slope to something other than 912, sections that extend way too far or not enough. Donnie, yes. Take it away.
Edit your template. It doesn't have to be a default Revit. Edit you have your own little template. Go and edit anything like that you want in your template and use it and then delete it. Because once you use something, then it becomes the default. So if you put in a roof that's going to be 412 or 812, whatever we want, then you put in a roof, then you delete it, and then that's next. That's a database. It's the default then. Edit your template.
We actually have a checklist when we update our master starter project. We use a starter project rather than the template of, if anyone has edited any of these, go through and do all of this and set this back. And like it's literally just like wade through these steps to make sure that the default behavior is exactly what we want. Yes. You know, it's opening a thing, place a wall, do this thing, but you can totally get a whole out of it. There's a lot of stuff you can't, but and I don't know of any of that is accessible other than just by actually setting it once. Yeah, you can totally do that.
Yeah, it's called making your own defaults in.
But someone will, if you've got multiple people editing your template or your start project, someone will edit one of those and forget to edit it. So write down the ones you want to set. Has the circuit length parameter coming from a nested device been fixed? We've had projects where the circuit length parameter coming from a nested device added hundreds of feet to the circuit length.
I'm going to assume that's nested things inside a family and then an electrical connector. Either way, I don't think it. I usually put my electrical connectors inside the host family, no matter what it is.
They said correct, a nested device inside an electrical fixture.
Yeah. Yeah, I usually put like an invisible host with an electrical connector inside the main family, and then I circuit from there. I do multiple electrical connections. If you have, like furniture drops, poles, you can do it there. But I've never had an issue with circuit length. One of the things that we have done is created a input parameter that we can schedule to override the circuit length. And then we do our own voltage drop calculations based on that.
They've added the challenge is we want to tag the nested data device.
Hmm.
Isn't that just creating in the family a shared family where you can tag them both? Vicky and I know her coworker Vicky's Cindy has taught me how to do that. You just have you share the family and you can tag in the family inside.
But then it
Yeah.
wants to schedule both.
Yeah, once you schedule both.
And you can schedule them both. I mean, you can do. I've done it with hospital family that had 20 pieces shared in there, and you could schedule each one individually and tag them all individually, and then there was a base deal. It's not, you gotta know what you're doing, but it's not hard.
Right.
I believe the issue actually, John, comes in when you nest a family and make it shared when it has a connector. Sometimes you can see some oddities on the circuit length specifically. In a lot of cases, it's because of how a shared nested family calculates its origin point, and the origin or the length of a circuit is based on the centroid of the overall family. And a shared nested family always has its origin sort of at like a 0 location, and then the family is placed up here. So then it creates this super long draw. That's a Revit bug, is what that is. And with shared nested families, y'all need to light up the forums and be like, hey, Autodesk, fix this because this is broken. That's straight up a bug.
Is that something that could be potentially fixed with the old invisible line to make something show up in a spot that it's not going to change the centroid of the secondary object?
No, sadly you can't, because the location of that nested family where Revit resolves it is in a stock location, and when you move your family around, that reference plane, and it's not referenceable by the API or by the add-in or Revit itself. So the position of that line off in the middle of space isn't going to solve your problem, other than just make your zoom extend super annoying.
Can you not find that object with some trial and error and get a stock thing that will place itself there that's visible, like we used to have to do with the
that's the tricky thing. There isn't
with
an
the origin
object.
No, but could you make something and maneuver it around logically to try and reverse engineer where that exists, and then place that object as a nested thing?
I have been unsuccessful so far in doing that with any of the content that exhibited that particular issue. I have tried, but when the bug decides to manifest, the bug is there. And it's been an issue in Revit since, well, the sharing and nesting of content has been a thing forever in Revit, pretty much since like 2002. But when they introduced electrical connectors and mechanical connectors, this particular bug manifested in about 2007, 2008, and it never got fixed, and it never got enough momentum behind it. You're seeing it today in the circuit length, and it's being really annoying. But I think that's one of the reasons that Mr. Atkinson created this override, because circuit lengths are untrustworthy in certain scenarios, and you can't always predict why or when. It may come to this, but it may be other things as well. And so we could just get some love on electrical stuff from Autodesk in the first place. That would be nice to better calculate circuit lengths. But
so we've got we're a minute from the top of the hour. I know a couple of folks have to hop. We've got one more question that I'm going to punt over to Justin from ATG. Midwest University was usually in March. Any word on if this will be returning as an event? I may not be able to comment on that.
I will.
Oh, go ahead, Sean.
I'm going to give the exact same answer that I gave for all these Autodesk things. Squeaky wheels get grease. If you want the event, let them know. The more popularity it kind of pulls in. I mean, ATG, just like Autodesk, is going to listen to their customers. I would say that Justin and I both will not have an answer for you today because there isn't any word. But if you want it back live, start blowing them up, and they'll make a live event, I'm sure.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Cool. We are at the top of the hour. Thank you all. It looks like we got through this is our slowest session. We went through into a little more detailed stuff, but we are now well over, it looks like 120 questions answered across these 3 sessions. we'd love to do it again. If you've got more crazy questions, you can always shoot us an email in advance if you know you've got something coming up, or if you can't make it. We've got like 3 more in the queue here in case we need them. But thank you all for coming. Thanks to all of my wonderful and amazing friends who I get to see far too infrequently for showing up and making some folks laugh.
We could increase that in-person visit if we had Midwest University live, though.
Totally true.
That's true. Yeah.
It's so much easier.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah.
Peace, everybody. Thank you all.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.